A mother's hands are shaking, not from cold, the spring air is warm. She's watching soldiers move through the line of women, pointing, selecting. Her daughter stands 3 bodies away, 14 years old. The girl knows to keep her eyes down, to make herself small, invisible. It doesn't work. A Mongol officer stops in front of her, lifts her chin with 2 fingers, turns her face left then right like examining livestock. He nods. A scribe steps forward with ink and parchment. Name, age, physical description. The bureaucracy of hell is meticulous. The girl is pulled from the line. The mother lunges forward. A guard's hand on her chest stops her cold. She watches her daughter disappear into a wagon with barred windows, one of dozens stretching behind the Mongol army like a serpent made of human cargo. That's the last time she'll see her child's face. This isn't a movie. This isn't exaggeration. This is what the Mongols actually did, and they did it with industrial precision that would make a factory manager proud. If you're ready to see how dark real history gets, hit that like button and subscribe. Seriously, comment below where you're listening from. I genuinely want to know where these stories travel. Now let's go deeper. Genghis Khan didn't build the largest contiguous empire in human history just by being good at mounted archery. He understood something other conquerors missed. Battles end, but genes are forever. Most warlords thought in terms of cities conquered, gold looted, enemies killed. Genghis Khan thought in terms of wombs controlled, bloodlines infiltrated, populations converted from the cellular level up. What he created wasn't just an empire, it was a biological invasion that would echo through genetics for centuries. While Alexander the Great dreamed of reaching the edge of the world, and Julius Caesar sought eternal glory through monuments, Genghis Khan pursued immortality through a method far more insidious and permanent. But to understand how he got there, you have to go back to the beginning. Back to when he was just a frightened child eating scraps in the Mongolian wilderness, learning lessons that would shape the fate of millions. Back to a world where survival meant taking everything and giving nothing, where weakness was death and mercy was suicide. 1162, somewhere in the vast emptiness of the Mongolian steppes, a boy is born into a world where mercy is a death sentence and strength is the only god anyone worships. His name is Temujin. The year of his birth allegedly coincides with his father capturing an enemy chieftain named Temujin Uge, a deliberate naming meant to commemorate victory. Even his name is marked by violence from the first breath. His father Yasuge is a minor chieftain of the Borjigin clan, not powerful enough to be respected, just visible enough to make enemies. In Mongolian tribal society, there's no middle class of safety. You're either strong enough to take what you want or you're prey. Yasuge occupies a dangerous middle ground, important enough that people notice him, not powerful enough that they fear him. It's the worst possible position, and young Temujin watches how other tribes treat his family with barely concealed contempt. The steppes teach brutal lessons. Resources are scarce. Pasture lands are contested. Every tribe competes for the same horses, the same grazing grounds, the same water sources. Cooperation is temporary, alliances are fragile, and betrayal is standard procedure. Temujin grows up understanding that today's ally might be tomorrow's murderer, that a smile during a feast could precede poison in your cup. Temujin is 9 years old when his father dies, probably poisoned by Tatar rivals during a supposed peace feast. One moment his father is alive, eating meat with men who smile at him. The next day he's vomiting blood and convulsing. By nightfall, he's dead. Young Temujin watches his father's body convulse, watches the light leave his eyes and learns lesson number 1. Trust no one, especially not those who smile. The clan elders gather and make their decision with brutal efficiency. Yasuge's family is now worthless. A dead chieftain has no value. His widow Hoelun and her children are resources that consume food without providing military strength. The elders announce their verdict. The family is cast out. Not just from positions of respect, cast out entirely, abandoned to die in the wilderness. The message is clear to young Temujin. In this world, there is no safety net, no mercy, no reward for past service. The moment you become weak, you become nothing. Watch what happens next, because this is where monsters are made. Or perhaps this is where a certain kind of brutal clarity is forged in the fires of absolute desperation. Hoelun takes her children and flees into the wilderness. Picture this. A widow with multiple young children. No clan protection, no resources, suddenly responsible for keeping everyone alive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The Mongolian steppes in winter can drop to 40 degrees below zero. In summer, there's no shade, no escape from the sun. Water sources are spread far apart. Predators, both human and animal, are everywhere. They eat whatever they can find. Roots dug from frozen ground with bare hands until fingers bleed. Fish caught with improvised traps in icy streams. Rodents trapped and eaten raw when there's no way to make fire without alerting enemies to their location. Insects, birds' eggs stolen from nests. Anything with calories becomes food. Hoelun teaches her children which plants won't kill them and which will. She teaches them to move silently, to hide, to become invisible. Temujin's younger brother Kasar becomes an expert archer out of pure necessity. Miss your shot, and the family doesn't eat that day. Temujin himself learns to fight other scavenger children for scraps of food left by travelling merchants. He learns that hesitation means starvation, that showing weakness invites attack, that mercy toward competitors means death for your family. Every day is a lesson in taking or being taken from. But there's one story from this period that defines everything that comes later. A story that reveals the exact moment Temujin crosses a line that can never be uncrossed. Temujin and Kasar are fishing when their half-brother Begta steals a fish they caught. Not just any fish. Food that took hours to catch. Food that might be the only protein the family eats for days. Begta is older, stronger, and he takes it simply because he can. It's not about the fish. It's about establishing dominance, about determining who controls resources in a family where resources mean survival. Temujin and Kasar make a decision. They stalk Begta to a hillside outside camp. Begta sees them coming with their bows. He knows what's about to happen. He could run. He could fight. Instead, he sits down and makes one request. Don't do it in front of Mother. Even in this moment, there's a plea for some basic humanity, some acknowledgement of family bonds. Temujin shoots him anyway, his own brother, over a fish. Well, not over a fish at all, over the principle that strength determines everything, that you cannot allow anyone to take from you without consequences, that establishing dominance is worth any price. Their mother Hoelun beats Temujin when she discovers what he's done. She beats him until her hands bleed, screaming that he's a mad dog, a destroyer of his own people, that he's become exactly the kind of monster who destroys clans from within. Her words cut deep. You're like a rabid dog, like a lion without patience, like a monster that swallows its prey alive. But Temujin has already learned the fundamental law of his universe. Kill or be killed, take or be taken from. There is no middle ground where mercy lives. His mother's beating doesn't change his mind. It confirms that she doesn't understand how the world actually works. She still believes in family, in bonds of blood, in human connection. Temujin has learned that these things are luxuries for the strong. The weak who cling to such sentiments simply die faster. For the next several years, Temujin survives through a combination of cunning, violence, and strategic alliance building. He's captured at one point by the Taichud clan, enemies of his father, and held as a slave with a wooden yoke around his neck. He escapes by using the yoke as a weapon, killing his guard and fleeing into the night. The experience teaches him about the value of patience, of waiting for the perfect moment, of striking with maximum force when opportunity presents itself. By 16, Temujin has clawed his way back to marginal respectability. He's engaged to Berta, a girl from the Kongirat clan. This marriage represents his first real chance at rebuilding his father's lost status, at creating alliances that might protect him. Berta's father sees potential. In the intense young man sees something fierce and unbreakable that might be valuable. The engagement is finalized. Temujin has something to lose again. Then the Merkits come, and everything Temujin has built collapses. The Merkits have a long memory. Years ago, Temujin's father Yasuge stole a woman named Hoelun from a Merkit warrior. Temujin's own mother was a kidnapped bride. In Mongolian culture, such grievances don't expire. The Merkits have waited for the right moment, and now they see it. Temujin is vulnerable, rebuilding, not yet strong enough to defend what's his. It's time to collect the debt. They raid at dawn. Temujin wakes to the sound of horses, of screams, of his camp in chaos. He has maybe 30 seconds to make a decision that will haunt him forever. Stand and fight and almost certainly die, or run and live. He chooses survival. He abandons Berta and flees into the forest. As he rides away, he can hear her screaming his name. Imagine what goes through his mind in the months that follow. The woman who represents his entire future, his pathway back to status and safety, is now in enemy hands. And he knows exactly what's happening to her because he knows exactly what happens to captured women in this culture. For months afterward, he hears rumours that eat him alive from the inside. The Merkits have made Berta a wife to one of their warriors. She's being raped repeatedly by multiple men. She's pregnant with a Merkit child. She's dead. She's alive but wishes she were dead. She's been traded to another tribe. She's been killed as a message to Temujin. Every version of the story is a knife in his gut. But one truth crystallizes in his mind through all the variations. He wasn't strong enough to protect what was his. This failure becomes the defining wound of his life. Not just the loss of Berta, but what the loss represents. His fundamental inadequacy, his inability to hold what he claims as his own. For a man who has built his entire identity around taking and holding and never showing weakness, this failure is intolerable. It becomes the engine that drives everything that follows. Temujin spends months gathering allies, calling in every favour, making every promise, assembling enough warriors to raid the Merkits and take Berta back. When the raid finally happens, it's successful. Temujin defeats the Merkit warriors, burns their camps, and reclaims his wife. But Berta is pregnant, visibly, undeniably pregnant. She gives birth 9 months after the rescue to a boy they name Yochi, which means guest or unexpected visitor. The name itself is loaded with ambiguity. Is Yochi Temujin's son or the son of the Merkit warrior who raped Berta? Nobody knows. Temujin publicly claims the boy as his own, but the question mark hangs over Hoshi's entire life like a shadow. Other Mongols whisper. Rivals use it as ammunition. Yoshi's own brothers will later treat him with suspicion and contempt. Eventually, Yoshi dies under mysterious circumstances during his father's lifetime, possibly killed by his brothers, possibly by his father's orders, possibly by his own hand unable to bear the uncertainty anymore. But here's what fundamentally changes in Temujin's mind the night he gets Berta back. He watches how different people respond to the trauma of the raid. The Merkit men who survived his rescue raid are completely broken. Some are suicidal with shame. Several literally kill themselves rather than live with the dishonour of defeat. In Mongolian warrior culture, losing in battle is the ultimate failure. These men cannot psychologically survive what's happened. But the women? The women survive. Berta survives. The other captured women survive. They adapt. They do what they must to stay alive. And then they bear children. And those children grow up remembering exactly who took their mothers, exactly who the enemy is, exactly what happened. Temujin sees something in this pattern that no one else sees, something that will change the course of world history. Women aren't just the prize of war, they're the weapon. They're the mechanism through which conquest becomes permanent. A man killed is just dead, a city burned is just destroyed. But a woman impregnated, she carries the future inside her body. Control the women of your enemies, and you control the next generation. You don't need to occupy their lands forever. You don't need to kill every man. You just need to ensure that the next generation carries your blood, speaks your language, grows up with loyalty to your empire. The conquered people will become Mongol from the inside out, whether they want to or not, because their own children will be half Mongol, raised in Mongol culture, thinking with Mongol minds. This isn't a theory he articulates. This is a blueprint that forms in his mind, refined through bitter personal experience. He knows what it's like to be the uncertain child. Yoki's parentage echoes his own questions about identity and belonging. He knows the power of blood claims and the way uncertainty about lineage can destroy a person's sense of self, and he realizes this uncertainty can be weaponized on a massive scale. This is the birth of something unprecedented in human history. Systematic rape as a tool of permanent imperial conquest, organized with military precision and bureaucratic efficiency. Over the next 15 years, Temujin transforms himself from a desperate survivor into Genghis Khan, the great Khan of all Mongols. He does this through undeniable military genius. His tactics revolutionize warfare. But he also does it through something darker that historians often gloss over or ignore entirely. He begins systematizing what every conquering army does chaotically. When Temujin raids a rival clan in these early years, he doesn't just take women randomly as personal prizes, he takes all women of childbearing age, every single one. He distributes them strategically among his warriors, not as rewards for valor, not as entertainment, but as breeding stock. He tracks which women become pregnant, which pregnancies result in healthy children, which children show physical traits that look Mongol enough, which bloodlines mix well. He's conducting experiments in forced population control, learning what works, refining his methods. His closest advisors notice this obsession and begin helping him systematize it. They're not monsters cackling about evil, they're administrators solving logistical problems. How do you track hundreds of captured women? You need records. How do you ensure pregnancies? You need medical protocols. How do you determine which children are worth keeping? You need classification criteria. The system emerges not from sadism, but from bureaucratic efficiency applied to atrocity. By 1206, when the fractious Mongol tribes finally unite and proclaim Temujin as Genghis Khan, the Great Khan, the universal ruler, he's already developed what his closest administrators will eventually call the permanent seeding system. The terminology itself is revealing. Not captured women, not war brides. Seeding, agricultural language applied to human reproduction. This isn't some mystical philosophy. It's a documented military protocol with specific procedures, clear objectives, and measurable outcomes. And the first large-scale experiments are about to begin. The Tanguts are first. 1209. The Western Xia Kingdom sits on the valuable edge of China, wealthy from Silk Road trade, protected by fortified cities, and a professional army funded by merchant taxes. They've dealt with steppe raiders before, barbarians who swoop in, grab some loot, and retreat back to the grasslands. They think they know what's coming. They have no idea. The Mongols don't arrive as a disorganized horde. The advance force that approaches Tangut territory includes the usual warriors, yes, but also a baggage train that would puzzle any traditional army. There are scribes carrying blank ledgers, census takers with protocols for demographic surveys, doctors who specialize in female anatomy and reproductive health, administrators whose sole job is logistics of human processing. To a Tangut observer, this support staff would seem bizarre. Why does a raiding army need reproductive health specialists? Before the siege even begins, Mongol intelligence operatives have already infiltrated Tangut cities. Some pose as merchants, others as refugees from other conflicts. A few simply bribe local officials. They're not gathering traditional military intelligence, or not just that, they're conducting census operations. How many women live in each city district? What are their ages? Physical characteristics? Are they married or unmarried? How many children have they previously had? Proof of fertility. What social class? Are they connected to important families? All of this information flows back to Mongol headquarters, where specialized clerks compile it into detailed population registries. Before a single arrow is fired, the Mongols know exactly what human resources each Tangut city contains. They're not planning a raid, they're planning a harvest. When the first Tangut city falls, and they do fall because Mongol siege warfare is devastatingly effective, the Mongols divide the population with mechanical precision. This isn't chaos. This isn't soldiers randomly grabbing whoever they want. This is organized processing. Men are separated into one group. Most are simply executed. They're militarily dangerous and economically expensive to maintain. A few with useful specialized skills like metalworking, engineering, or siegecraft are enslaved. But they're a tiny minority. The vast majority of adult and adolescent males are killed within hours of the city's fall, but the women? The women are categorized according to pre-established protocols. Primary reproducers, ages 14 to 30, no visible deformities or disabilities, healthy appearance, preferably unmarried, but marriage status isn't disqualifying. These women receive an ink mark on the left wrist, a number that corresponds to entries in the Mongol registry. Each number is unique, like a modern serial number. They're assigned to the first caravan, the highest priority group. Secondary reproducers, ages 31 to 40, preferably women who've already had children. Proven fertility is valuable even at older ages. They receive a different mark, assignment to a second caravan. They're backup stock used if the primary group proves insufficient. Waste material, girls under 14, too young for immediate breeding. Women over 40, past prime reproductive age, Anyone sick, disabled, or visibly injured. These are taken to the edge of camp in groups. What happens there isn't recorded in detail in the surviving records, but it's clear they don't come back, most likely killed en masse. Possibly some of the younger girls are kept for future use once they reach appropriate age, but there's no systematic tracking of this group. The caravans that follow the Mongol army aren't improvised prison wagons. They're mobile processing facilities, designed by people who've thought carefully about the logistics of managing thousands of captured women across vast distances. Each wagon is divided into internal compartments like stables partitioned for different types of animals. Newly captured women go in one section. They're the most dangerous, most likely to resist or attempt escape. Confirmed pregnant women go in another compartment. They need monitoring but are less flight risky because pregnancy complicates running. Women who've recently given birth occupy a third section. They're nursing and therefore even more controlled by their circumstances. Women who've failed to become pregnant after multiple months of systematic rape go in a fourth section. That fourth section has much higher mortality rates. Women who prove unproductive are eliminated to free up resources for more promising stock. The wagons themselves are engineered for their purpose. Barred windows too small to escape through but large enough for air circulation. Dead women are worthless. Interior layouts that prevent women from easily communicating or organising. Separate doors for different compartments so the whole wagon doesn't need to be opened at once. Even the wheel designs are specific. These wagons carry heavy loads slowly over long distances, so they need durability over speed. Mongol doctors, and they absolutely do have doctors, trained in Chinese and Persian medical traditions, not primitive shamans, develop techniques specifically for maximising pregnancy rates. They experiment with various herbs known to affect fertility. Chinese medicine has a long tradition of herbal treatments for reproductive issues, and the Mongols access this knowledge. They implement dietary protocols, discovering that certain nutritional balances improve conception rates. They even perform crude surgical procedures to correct physical problems that might prevent pregnancy, blocked fallopian tubes, uterine abnormalities, anything they can diagnose and potentially fix with medieval medical technology. These aren't healers operating from compassion. They're livestock managers, applying veterinary techniques to human reproductive stock. The parallels to animal husbandry are explicit in the surviving administrative records. Terms used for horse breeding appear in documents about the caravan women. The same officials who manage the Mongol horse herds often oversee the reproductive caravans. The bureaucracy is meticulous, almost obsessive. Every rape is logged, the identity number of the woman, the date, which caravan, which wagon number, even which guard or warrior is responsible. Why such detail? Because if a woman becomes pregnant, the Mongols want to know approximately when conception occurred and who the father might be, not for sentimental reasons, for genetic tracking. They're trying to understand which combinations produce the healthiest, most Mongol-looking children. Every pregnancy is registered the moment it's confirmed. The woman's identification number, the approximate conception date, any complications during early pregnancy. Doctors check pregnant women regularly, not out of concern for their well-being, but because a failed pregnancy is a waste of months of investment. They want to catch and address problems early. Every birth is recorded in extraordinary detail. Date and time of birth. Sex of the child. Physical description, this is crucial. Hair colour and texture. Eye shape and colour. Skin tone. Facial structure. All of this is documented because it determines the infant's fate. Mongol administrators maintain massive ledgers tracking all of this information. Some of these ledgers survive in Chinese and Persian archives, and they're horrifying to read. Page after page of women reduced to breeding statistics, children, categorized by physical traits like livestock. Women lose their names the day they're captured. They become numbers. Unit 4, 382, Unit 7691. The Mongol clerks tattoo these numbers on their wrists in permanent ink, using techniques learned from Chinese prisoners who know tattooing methods. Beneath the number, a code indicating tribal origin, Tangut, Jin, Khwarezmian. Another code for social class, nobility, merchant class, peasant. A third code for reproductive history, virgin, proven fertile, number of previous births. A woman can look down at her own wrist and see her identity reduced to administrative data. Everything she was, daughter, sister, wife, mother, person with dreams and fears and a name her own mother gave her, all of that erased, replaced with numbers that define her only in terms of her utility to Mongol imperial expansion. Some women try desperately to resist this erasure. They whisper their real names to their children during the brief periods before the Mongols separate them. They carve symbols into their skin where tattoos can't cover, their husband's name, their village, their family clan sign, anything to remember who they were. They teach each other their names in whispered chains, each woman memorizing the names of women in her wagon, so that someone, somewhere, might remember. But the system is designed to break these connections. Guards who catch women communicating punish them severely. Children are separated from mothers within days of birth for the ones who pass inspection, within hours for the ones who don't. Within a year, most women have become ghosts of their former selves, existing only as productive units in the Mongol reproductive machine, their previous identities dissolved into trauma and despair. The children born in the caravans face immediate ruthless inspection. Within hours of birth, Mongol officials examine each infant according to specific physical criteria. They're looking for Mongol traits, certain facial structures, eye shapes, hair texture, skin tone. The criteria aren't random, they're based on extensive observation of what physical characteristics successfully integrate into Mongol society. Babies who pass inspection are separated from their mothers within days. Usually the mother never even gets to hold the child long enough to bond. The infants are sent to Mongol families, often families who've lost children and need replacements, or families loyal to the Khan who've proven they'll raise the children as proper Mongols. These children grow up speaking only Mongolian, worshipping Mongol gods and spirits, thinking of themselves as fully Mongol. Most never learn about their true origins. They become warriors, administrators, mothers of the next generation, completely integrated into the empire that was built on their birth mother's suffering. The children who fail inspection, too obviously foreign-looking, too clearly marked by their non-Mongol parent, are killed immediately. The methods vary. Sometimes exposure, left outside the camp to die of cold or heat or predators, sometimes more direct, smothered, strangled, throats cut. The records don't dwell on specifics, because to the administrators this is just waste disposal. These infants failed quality control. They're useless to the Empire's purposes. Keeping them alive would consume resources better spent on productive units. Think about what this means for the mothers. A woman endures months of systematic rape. She becomes pregnant through that rape. She carries the pregnancy, knowing the child is both part of her and part of her enemy. She gives birth under guard in a wagon designed for processing human breeding stock, and then, within hours, her child is taken away. If the baby looks sufficiently Mongol, she'll never see it again. If the baby doesn't pass inspection, she might hear it crying as it's carried away to be killed. Or she might hear nothing at all, might simply watch a guard walk away carrying a bundle that stops moving. Some women break completely at this point, catatonic, non-responsive, no longer eating without force-feeding. The records describe these women in clinical terms, unproductive due to mental deterioration. They're eliminated because they can't be made pregnant again in that psychological state. Other women harden. Something inside them crystallizes into pure hate, cold and clear as ice. These women become the most dangerous to guard because they are utterly without fear. They have nothing left to lose. These are the women who'll attack a guard with bare hands, knowing it means death, just for the chance to cause one moment of pain to their captors. And some women survive by dissociating, by becoming almost mechanical in their compliance, going through the motions of existence without really being present in their own bodies. The records note these women as acclimated and highly productive, not recognizing or caring that they've essentially witnessed a form of psychological death. By 1211, when Genghis Khan decides to invade the Jin Empire of northern China, the system has evolved from experiment to standard operating procedure. The Jin Empire is massive, millions of people, hundreds of cities, one of the most sophisticated civilizations on Earth at that time. The Jin dynasty rules northern China with a professional army, advanced siege weaponry, and enormous economic resources. By all traditional calculations, the Mongols should lose this confrontation. But the Mongols aren't thinking traditionally. They're going to try to conquer the Jin Empire with systematic rape on an industrial scale, and the initial results will be terrifying in their effectiveness. The numbers from the Jin campaign are staggering even in historical records that probably undercount. In Zhongdu alone, modern-day Beijing, Mongol administrative records indicate the capture of over 40,000 women of reproductive age. not taken as personal slaves by individual warriors, captured systematically, processed through the caravan system documented in the registries. This is from one city. By 1213, Mongol administrative reports reference over 100,000 women distributed across the caravan network, which now extends for hundreds of kilometers behind the main army. The caravans have become a mobile city larger than most actual cities of the period. Managing this many people requires sophisticated logistics: food, water, medical care, guards, transportation, record-keeping. The Mongols develop all of it. The caravans have become mobile cities dedicated entirely to forced reproduction. They have internal organization more complex than many feudal kingdoms. There are hierarchies, specialized roles, career paths for administrators. Capture squads are warriors specifically trained in rounding up women during city raids. They know how to identify the target demographics. They carry the ink and tools for initial marking. They're evaluated based on how many quality units they capture with minimal damage. Classification administrators examine each captured woman and determine her category. They check teeth, posture, skin quality, evidence of disease. They conduct crude gynecological examinations to assess reproductive viability. The most experienced administrators can categorize a woman in under 2 minutes. Acclimation supervisors oversee the initial months after capture, a euphemism for the period of systematic rape designed to break women's psychological resistance. These supervisors have learned specific techniques. Total isolation breaks some women faster. Grouping women together but preventing communication works for others. Allowing occasional kindness from guards creates confusing emotional dependency. They've accidentally developed early versions of trauma bonding techniques. Pregnancy monitors track which women become pregnant and manage their care during gestation. They're trained to identify early pregnancy signs before modern testing exists. They know which herbs reduce morning sickness so women can keep food down. They know how to position pregnant women in the wagons to minimize miscarriage risk during transport. Not from compassion, every miscarriage is a failed production cycle. Birth attendants handle deliveries. These are often experienced midwives captured from conquered cities and forced to assist. They know they're helping perpetuate a system of atrocity, but refusing means their own death, so they assist. They deliver the babies, cut the cords, do the immediate health assessment, and then watch as infants are either taken for Mongol raising or carried away for disposal. Elimination crews are the darkest part of the system. They quietly dispose of women who die, and many die. Disease, complications from rape, suicide, murder by other prisoners, punishment by guards. They also dispose of the babies who don't pass inspection. The records occasionally note waste, disposal without elaborating. Archaeological evidence from areas along caravan routes reveals mass burial sites filled with remains of women and infants, showing signs of violent death. Each of these roles has documented protocols. The Mongols have literally written manuals for industrial-scale sexual violence. Some of these documents survive in Chinese archives because the later Yuan dynasty, Mongol rulers of China, kept administrative records that were eventually captured and preserved by successor dynasties. Reading them is like reading bureaucratic documents about factory production, except the product is traumatized women and mixed-race children. Women who resist face calculated, almost scientific consequences. The Mongols have studied resistance and developed countermeasures for every type. Women who refuse to eat face force feeding. Guards use wooden tubes forced down the throat, then pour in water mixed with ground grain. The process is agonizing. The tube scrapes the throat, the mixture causes gagging, women often vomit it back up only to have the process repeated. But the message is clear. Your body is not yours. You exist to serve a function. You will be kept alive for that function regardless of your wishes. Women who attempt abortion, using herbs, self-inflicted trauma, any method they can devise, are placed under constant surveillance once discovered or suspected. In late pregnancy, they're physically restrained, sometimes tied spread-eagle in the wagons to prevent any movement that might harm the fetus. They're fed, cleaned, and monitored like valuable livestock. Guards check on them regularly. After they give birth, they face additional punishment, usually savage beatings that leave them unable to walk, but don't damage reproductive organs. Women who self-harm to make themselves unproductive, cutting their faces to become less desirable, injuring themselves to induce infection or disease, are kept alive as examples. They're paraded in front of newly captured women during the acclimation period as warnings. Look what happens to women who resist. This is your fate if you fight. The message usually works. Most newly captured women, after seeing these living warnings, choose compliance as the lesser horror. The worst punishment is reserved for women who kill their own infants. Some mothers, knowing their baby will be raised as a Mongol warrior who might one day rape other women like their mother was raped, choose infanticide as an act of resistance and mercy. When discovered, these women face public torture designed to be so horrific that every other woman in the caravan learns the lesson. The torture varies, but it always involves maximum pain over maximum time, flaying small strips of skin, breaking bones one at a time, burning extremities. The goal isn't quick death, it's creating a spectacle so terrible that every other woman watching understands that even mercy toward your own child will be punished beyond imagination. And it works. Infanticide attempts decrease dramatically after such displays. The Mongol system doesn't just break bodies, it systematically fractures souls, destroys identities, erases cultures. It's designed to do this. The administrators understand psychology even if they wouldn't use that term. They know that to fully control someone, you must destroy their sense of self, must sever their connection to their previous identity, must make them forget they were ever anything other than what the system has made them. But the women develop their own resistance, invisible to the bureaucratic records. Humans are remarkably resilient, and where there's oppression, there's resistance, even in the most constrained circumstances. Women create gesture languages, ways to communicate without words that guards can't easily detect. A particular way of holding hands means, I know an escape route. Scratching your left ear means, guard is watching, be careful. Certain patterns of breathing convey, I have abortion herbs hidden, or I'm planning suicide, remember my name. Information passes through the caravans like underground rivers, hidden but flowing steadily. Which guards get drunk and careless? Which routes pass near forests or rivers that might enable escape? What herbs induce abortion, and where might you find them in different regions? How do you poison breast milk without leaving evidence? How do you make yourself sick enough to become unproductive, without making yourself so sick you die? Some women develop techniques to vomit food discreetly after eating. They chew and swallow normally in front of guards, then induce vomiting once alone. Done consistently, this gradually weakens them until they're too sick for pregnancy. The trick is managing the rate of decline. Too fast and they're obviously self-harming, too slow and they endure more pregnancies before becoming unproductive. Others learn to cut themselves in hidden places where guards don't look. Inner thighs, armpits, anywhere that might become infected and cause fever. Fever during pregnancy often leads to miscarriage. Create enough miscarriages and eventually you're categorized as unreliable stock and eliminated, which for many women is preferable to continuing in the system indefinitely. Some women form secret pairs or triads, supporting each other emotionally, sharing food, protecting each other from guards when possible. The Mongol administrators notice this and actively work to prevent bonding. Women are regularly shuffled between caravans regularly to prevent this. But the bonds reform. Humans need connection to survive psychologically, and women find ways. The most painful resistance is emotional and cultural preservation. Women create secret rituals to remember their dead children's names. In whispered circles after dark, they recite lists. My son was Rashid. Her daughter was Fatima. Her twins were Ahmad and Hassan. The names become prayers, become acts of defiance against the system that tries to erase everything. They preserve fragments of their cultures in songs hummed so quietly, guards can't hear the words. Lullabies from their homelands, wedding songs, funeral dirges. The melodies carry memories of who they were before the caravans, before the numbers tattooed on their wrists. They know they'll probably die in these caravans. The mortality rate is catastrophic, but they fight to ensure something of their cultures survives, even if only as whispers in the night air of the steppes, even if only as memories carried by women who'll soon be dead themselves. 1219 brings the Khwarezmian campaign, and the system reaches its most refined form. The Khwarezmian Empire sprawls across Central Asia, modern Iran, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, wealthy from controlling key Silk Road trade routes, sophisticated in its Persian cultural traditions, confident in its military strength. The Mongol intelligence network has evolved into something remarkable and terrifying. Months before the invasion, agents are already inside Khwarezmian cities, compiling information not just on women, but on entire social networks. They map family relationships, identify emotional attachments, note which women have children still living, which have elderly parents depending on them. The Mongols have learned that psychological control is as important as physical control. When the Mongols take Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, cities that represent the pinnacle of Central Asian civilization, they don't just sack them, they harvest them with industrial precision. The separation of women from families is executed like a factory assembly line. The Mongols have learned specific psychological techniques through trial and error. Keep mothers with young children for the first 3 weeks of captivity. This increases compliance during the initial breaking period, because mothers are desperately trying to protect their children, but separate them after exactly 3 months. By then, hope has started to reform in the mothers' minds. Maybe they'll survive this together, maybe somehow they'll escape, and crushing that renewed hope produces maximum psychological collapse. The system now includes protocols for different social classes, because the Mongols have learned that genetics and social training both matter for integration. Noble women receive special processing, rape by higher-ranking Mongol officers rather than common soldiers, slightly better food, access to basic hygiene, accommodation in tents rather than cages. This isn't mercy, it's selective breeding. The Mongols have observed that children of noble women, raised with Mongol values, integrate particularly well into positions of imperial authority. They have the genetic advantages of noble bloodlines plus the cultural programming of Mongol supremacy. They become ideal administrators for conquered territories. Peasant women are mass-processed with minimal individual attention, valued for physical resilience and sheer reproductive capacity. Can they survive pregnancy in harsh conditions? Can they give birth without significant medical intervention? Can they produce multiple children in rapid succession? These are the criteria. The doctors have refined their techniques further. Combinations of herbs that induce hyperovulation, increasing chances of twins or triplets. Dietary protocols that maximize infant survival rates. Careful tracking of women's menstrual cycles to time rapes for maximum conception probability. They've turned reproduction into an optimization problem, and they're solving it with medieval medicine and ruthless experimentation. By 1220, the scale defies comprehension. Caravan networks stretch from Mongolia to Eastern Europe, processing hundreds of thousands of women. The infrastructure rivals that of most kingdoms: resupply stations, field hospitals, classification centres, morgue facilities. The Mongols have created mobile industrial complexes dedicated to forced reproduction, moving like shadows behind their conquering armies. But the true genius, if you can call something so monstrous genius, isn't the efficiency, it's the permanence. Genghis Khan understood what other conquerors missed. Rape could be temporary, but genes are forever. Every child born from the system carries Mongol genetic markers that echo through generations. Modern genetic studies confirm this with disturbing precision. Approximately 16 million men alive today descend from Genghis Khan's lineage. 1 in every 200 men worldwide. In Mongolia, 8%. Central Asia, 3%. Even Eastern Europe shows the markers, but it didn't end with Genghis Khan. His sons, grandsons and generals all continued the protocols. Ugadai refined them in Europe. Minka applied them against the Abbasid Caliphate. Kublai used them throughout China. The system became imperial doctrine, passed down like any military tradition. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, the caravan women were redistributed among Mongol princes like inherited livestock. Thousands were executed during the succession chaos to prevent escapes. Their bodies went into mass graves archaeologists now discover, organised with the same bureaucratic precision that characterised the living system. Near Bukhara, archaeologists found 2 bodies buried together, a mother and teenage daughter reunited in death. DNA confirmed their relationship. Isotope analysis showed the girl had travelled vast distances before dying. She could have been Zarya, the girl from the beginning of this story. The mother who watched her daughter taken could have been any of thousands. The names are lost, but the bones remember. The Mongols didn't see themselves as monsters. In their worldview, they were building an empire, creating order, uniting the world. The reproductive system was statecraft, as legitimate as taxation. The bureaucrats maintaining those ledgers were doing their jobs, serving their empire efficiently. That's what makes this particularly chilling, the banality of it. Evil wearing the mask of efficiency, speaking the language of necessity, justified by the logic of power. The genetic legacy persists in millions of bodies today. Most carrying those markers don't know their ancestors' history, don't know their living evidence of systematic sexual violence from 8 centuries ago. The women's names are forgotten, their stories are lost, but their DNA still speaks, testimony written in the structure of human populations across Eurasia. This is how conquest becomes permanent, not through deaths you cause, but through lives you force into existence. Genghis Khan's true achievement and true atrocity was understanding that controlling reproduction meant controlling the future itself. Every pregnancy in those caravans was a victory that could never be undone. The empires crumbled, the Mongol domains fragmented and fell, but the genes remain, indelible proof that history's greatest conqueror wasn't the man who killed the most enemies, but the one who most systematically weaponized women's bodies as instruments of permanent conquest. If history this dark makes you uncomfortable, good. It should. But if you want to keep confronting the truths they don't teach in schools, subscribe now. Hit that notification bell. Comment below where you're listening from and what other dark historical truths you want exposed. I read every comment. This isn't entertainment, it's memory, and memory is the only defense against repetition. The women of those caravans have no graves we can visit, no monuments bearing their names. But we can remember what was done to them. We can refuse to let their suffering be erased by time. That's the least we owe them. That's the least we owe history.